1 minute in, and I've got about a 90-minute presentation I'm going to do in 25 minutes. Hello, everyone. My name is Jason Prost. I am the head of growth technologies at Checkpoint. My particular department, this out so I don't get quite so much sibilance. My particular responsibility is covering all of our cloud security, our workforce security, and our overarching platform security strategy with regards to sales, positioning, discussing it with customers, etc. Today, I am going to talk about cyber threat prevention architecture, how we modernize our an approach to modernizing our cybersecurity environments, our cybersecurity architecture that's out there. I've been in the industry since the late 90s. I've come up with a lot of the things that the industry has worked on with the market, and hopefully today's perspective will give you some fresh new ideas and thoughts about how to approach cybersecurity. I want to start with cyber threat intelligence. I had the opportunity to meet with several federal agencies, sit on a round table with the CIA, the FBI, Department of Homeland Security. I and a group of partners sat on a round table talking with the cyber threat intelligence groups around what they were doing, what the industry is doing, how we can improve, etc. One of the interesting takeaways that came from that particular roundtable discussion, there was a lot of conversation about how to improve it. There's been a lot of progress that's made to really segment and delineate threat intelligence around 4 particular areas: technical, tactical, operational, and strategic. And it's really cool the work that's been done in cyber threat intelligence. But the conversation started to veer off towards this, and we need to do the following things because we've got to protect our environments. We've got to improve cyber threat intelligence because we have to do a better job of protecting our environments. And I interjected and I said, I'd like to point out that I think that cyber threat intelligence, the progress that's been made there, and what we have around cyber threat intelligence today isn't where our problems are. I think that our environments are vulnerable and insecure. I think the approach that we take to our architecture is where we are prone to attack and vulnerability, susceptible to compromise, despite a plethora of cyber threat intelligence. And interestingly, the head of the CIA and the head of FBI's threat intelligence groups, they started nodding their heads and shaking vigorously around that because we got to a place where we were talking about protection when cyber threat intelligence is about information. The other thing that's really cool, and I brought this to bear, this is a quote from the acting director for the Office of the President. If anyone is working with public sector, especially federal, you know that there is a driving movement to modernize their cybersecurity infrastructure and their cybersecurity programs. Not a little one, a massive movement. In fact, for the first time, many in the industry recognize that the federal government is moving faster than private sector at adopting and transforming their cybersecurity programs and infrastructure, and it's because of one key particular area, and we're going to talk a little bit about that and talk about how to approach it from there. But this idea of modernizing our programs through intelligent and vigorous use of modern technology and security practices, I'm going to start with a very basic one. I want to start with one that's extremely basic. It's a pet peeve of mine. I've sat on the partner side for most of my career, and now coming to Checkpoint for the last 3 years, I've now sit on the supplier side. This is probably, of all the things that I would ask customers and I would ask the market to think about. The biggest one is to make sure that the systems aren't critically exposed. I mean, what was SolarWinds? SolarWinds was the fact that we had a vital system that had exploits built in it that was pervasive across all of our infrastructure. Here's 4 vendors, 4 primary security vendors, big security vendors out there, and the critical vulnerabilities in mean time to repair over the last 6 years. This data was updated in November. I regret to say that several of those have increased in the last 6 months with regards to the number of critical vulnerabilities. It is unbelievably disheartening to learn about vulnerabilities. By the way, this isn't about besmirching a particular supplier or a particular vendor or a particular product. That isn't the issue. The issue is that as a market, the number of RFPs, for instance, that we respond to on our end that ever ask questions around this is 0. We're never being asked to provide efficacy around our software. And it sort of boggles me that being a practitioner of cybersecurity for 30 years, that we have a market and an industry that doesn't spend a great deal of time worrying about the security infrastructure that we put into our environments and how secure they are. That's all. I think that we can do a much better job as a vendor community, a partner community, and a market in demanding that the code that we are putting inside of our environments is secure and has a track record of being secure. But let's move on to the modernization one, because this one's just a practice. This is just modernizing your practice, updating your practice with something that is pretty obvious. We're now all talking about supply chain. We're now all looking at supply chain attacks and how to look at third-party suppliers and how they are providing secure code. I want to talk about zero trust. And I want to talk about zero trust, not zero trust network access, not a particular product. I'm talking about a philosophical, architectural approach to security, a way to change the way we look at it. First and foremost, zero trust and zero trust architecture is built on 7 basic pillars. The first one is around resources and making sure that resources are understood, whether it be data, whether it be the application services that you have, the users, et cetera. All of those are considered resources. The second one is around communication, and that's just making sure that all communication protocols are being inspected, looked at, and are being considered from a security perspective. The third is around sessions, making sure that what you're not doing is trusting that everything after authentication is open and allowed to pass, but that you're actually inspecting and authenticating and authorizing sessions. The fourth one has to do with dynamic policy, and this is with regards to making sure that policy is following the rule of least privilege, so that as users are leveraging the policies that exist within your program and those controls that you have in your program, that the rule of least privilege is actually affecting those policies, that it isn't because I'm allowing everyone on this network through, that now everyone, regardless of what their role is, can do what they need to do. The fifth one has to do with monitoring. That's pretty straightforward, but it's making sure that you see everything that's going on in your environment. Sixth has to do with authentication and authorization, making sure that there's a strong foundation around authentication and authorization. And the last one is around automation. This has to do with continuous improvement, making sure that the environment is iterating on itself and is improving upon itself, whether that is through your program or that's through some form of automation. The automation comes from the way that you've implemented your program and your architecture. Usually when I talk to customers about this, and I was having a very good conversation with a large client down in Atlanta, we talked about this, and they went, boy, if we just had the budget to be able to do this. Sure, this would be great. But budget prevents us from going down this path. And what I said is I talked to them and I said, look, there's a practical way to approach this. This is from Forrester. This sort of shows the relationship between people, devices, workloads, networks, the data, and how you sort of wrap around visibility, automation, orchestration, and analysis. More importantly, in the Forrester report, where they talk about a practical approach, they show that they show 4 or 5 key ways to progress through that zero trust journey. The first being identity, the second around workforce. I've sort of adjusted this to the way that I believe that it is effective, but everything starts on a basis of having a strong identity program, understanding who the people are, who your assets are, et cetera. Being able to drive identification is key. But then you've got these 4 others that progress closer and closer towards the data. This is not a unique topic. I was working on stuff like this back in 1998. So there's nothing new with regards to this. Really, where the newness comes is around the technologies that sit in these 3 particular areas and the capacity to drive a strong identity program. I'm able to talk about the 3. There's a lot of other people that are able to talk about identity security programs and governance, data security, and governance, and the way that those would be implemented. And in fact, the utopian environment would be one that eliminates 2, 3, and 4 entirely and just has incredibly strong authentication, authorization, and controls on your data, based off of identity, and therefore it doesn't matter what you're going through. However, our environments don't live that way. Our environments are 30 years old and they're maturing and changing dynamically. And therefore, we really need to understand how we approach it from these 3 other areas, and they're the 3 areas that I happen to support. The first one has to do with workforce. Our workforce environments have changed dramatically over the last 2 years, 3 years, very dramatically. The shift to work from home, the adoption of cloud, has created a workforce that needs access to on-prem resources as well as cloud resources, that has integrated in with identity providers that are able to provide authentication, authorization, and controls from that level. Additionally, on top of this, there's a whole set of controls that need to be able to be implemented that look for things like anti-malware, antivirus, that look for secure remote access, that ZTNA is an example, that look at data access or look at EDR, XDR, and build into the EDR, XDR framework that's there, that drive into applications and provide content whitening, et cetera. All of these things are things that should be implemented based on the user, not based on device. It's not how the market asks for technology today. The market today typically asks for technology based on one of 2 things. They will say that they want to secure their laptops or their workstations, or they want to secure their SaaS applications, and they will differentiate between the manner in which these are to be secured. In a modern architecture, all of these things should coexist and shouldn't require that you as a market or that the customers, that our enterprises adopt integration strategy for integrating and tying all of these things together. All of this should coexist in one architecture so that the protections that exist on your laptop are the exact same protections that you have on your mobile devices, the exact same protections that you have up in the cloud on your SaaS application, be it email or other collaboration tools like Teams or Google Chat. You want to extend the very same types of controls, the very same types of protections in all of them, and not compromise on either of them. When you do that, what you're able to do is you're able to drive very strong orchestration and automation across all of those different, the different facets of workforce security, whether it be a laptop or a mobile device. You're able to have an event that occurs on your laptop result in very strict enforcement and control on your mobile device and vice versa. You're able to have those coexist and work together in a more orchestrated and automated fashion when they are part of the same program and the same architectural requirements. On the cloud side, interestingly, Zero Trust is probably the easiest place to implement. Um, there's a lot of conflicting data out there with regards to it. However, my position is that all of the architecture is already in place inside the cloud. Whether we're looking at infrastructure, whether we're looking at workloads, or we're looking at pipeline, what's very interesting is in a multi-cloud environment, we have tools that are able to provide us with visibility across that entire multi-cloud environment. We're able to look at the posture of those third-party environments, and we're able to assess that posture over time. We're able to drill down and isolate our containers. We're able to isolate our workloads into containers, into serverless functions. We're able to drive identity-based decisions all the way down through that stack. We're able to drive it at the network, and we're able to then merge all the way out to the left into our pipeline in the CI/CD DevSecOps side. And we're able to drive identity-based security measures there around authorization and control. The work that's being done right now on that shift left DevOps side, looking at the code that builds those applications, the native applications that are in the cloud, is advancing at a rapid pace. Looking at the authors of the code and the reliability of those authors. Looking at the code base itself and how often it's been updated and when it was updated. The domains it's coming from and whether the domains have been hijacked. Looking at the licenses of the code that sits there and making sure that organizations are protected from license misuse and license injection, where it isn't just a log4shell, log4j attack that's looking at actual vulnerability in code, but vulnerability that exists in the license of that code that exposes an enterprise to data access that you didn't expect because you thought it was an MIT license, but the organization actually implemented a different license under the sheets that you didn't actually inspect and look at. All of that type of stuff is happening in the pipeline today. And driving an ability, enabling organizations to drive a very automated and orchestrated cloud environment, a very rich security architecture on the cloud side that is tied to identities and tied to access control through the whole piece of it, all the way down to the data. That's very exciting because it's probably, in my mind, this is one of the easiest places to implement zero trust. And we should be demanding as an industry, demanding as a market, that the cloud security infrastructure that we have and the cloud security strategy that we have be able to be applied on whatever the platform is and whatever the integrations are that need to happen, wherever they are, whatever they are, those should be available to you. And then on the network side, and I left this for last because while it is probably the most commonplace, it is one of the most daunting places to implement zero trust. We have legacy infrastructure, we have legacy architecture, we have an expectation of very specific types of services that are able to be delivered, so it's not as easy to drive a robust zero trust architecture in the network. That said, it is capable of being done. Today, perimeter firewalls are now capable of looking bidirectionally at traffic and driving dynamic policy and identity-based policy bidirectionally. This is something that has been a benefit to organizations as they have shifted to work from home and they've had to collapse their remote offices into cloud or into closets that were very bidirectional to allow individuals to come in through the closet where they eliminated the remote office and they turned it into just a closet server setup that allowed them to sort of pivot and come in through that access point. Inside the organization, we see a dramatic increase in IoT security and IoT vulnerability. A recent report said that 90% of the security attacks that are going on have come from IoT. It wasn't, this didn't come from Checkpoint's research group, it was another research group that was out there. But IoT has dramatically risen with regards to its profile and its attack surface and the manner in which people are looking at IoT. There are security measures that are able to be taken and architecture that's able to be implemented that allows you to identify and allows you to segment dynamically that IoT environment inside an enterprise and drive controls to ensure that IoT environments that start to demonstrate aberrant behavior are able to be quarantined, are able to be isolated because they're able to be very rapidly identified and moved. And then at the data center, we now have a hybrid data center that needs to be able to integrate with the cloud and needs to be able to drive that, what I call intelligent isolation and segmentation into the data center. Our technology that's out there today is capable of doing that. Not just checkpoints. I mean, the network security infrastructure now has come to a place where it is able to drive many of these particular requirements from the perimeter all the way down into the data center. And that's very exciting. Automation, orchestration, the entire bit being able to be fit in. And so we as an industry and we as a market should be looking at how we're able to improve our network around identity-based authentication and authorization. These are the 4 things that are really strong capabilities inside of our network infrastructure that exists out there today, that all of you are using today. They typically are able to provide prevention, they're able to provide automation, they're able to provide isolation, and they're able to provide resiliency, all of which are tenets of a zero trust architecture. So I wanted to go back, and I wanted to go back to the threat intelligence piece that I talked at the beginning, because I think that there's a key tie-in between that and modernizing our infrastructure and looking at how we approach zero trust. Many years ago, at the beginning of my career, I had a university talk to me about managed services and this concept of time versus value. They're like, look, our objective is to take the people that we've hired that are very smart and very capable people. We want to move them from mechanical and operational tasks to strategic and analytical tasks. And we need you and your solutions to provide those mechanical and operational value. It's why we have a cycle that goes from managed services to internal services to managed services, because organizations are struggling with a balance between these 2 things. Here's where threat intelligence comes in, and one of the exciting pieces about threat intelligence. For many years, threat intelligence has been about being able to get a feed. So we, as consumers, get a feed of threat intelligence where we're able to look at a vulnerability, we're able to decode it, we're able to understand what it's about, and we're able to go on our own little threat hunt. And we're able to drive the technical exercise of protecting our organization, implementing the policies and everything that needs to be done. The modern role of threat intelligence today is to eliminate that particular operational task. Threat intelligence today is so verbose, it is so enriched that the architecture and technology that we implement today should be able to leverage it to automate the types of policy changes that need to happen. We're already doing this in the cloud. In the cloud, as we move code from the left into production, cloud security technology today is able to look at that and is able to make dynamic changes to least privilege, is able to assess and audit the code, look at infrastructure as code on Kubernetes to ensure that it conforms to best practice and gold standards, and is able to do all of those things, and it's able to base all of those changes on threat intelligence. Artificial intelligence and deep learning enable that type of threat intelligence to now change and rapidly adapt policy based on the types of attacks and threats that are occurring, what our vulnerability posture looks like at that time, and make changes. Posture management in the cloud is designed to automate change based off of regulation that we put in place. We say this must conform to the following rules, and now you're going to measure that on a rapid basis all the time, and you're going to rapidly automate and fix and maintain the security of my posture, because I don't manage that third-party posture. That third-party platform isn't something that I manage. So threat intelligence is about taking that accurate prevention and imparting it down into our network security, our cloud security, our workforce security, and all of the other third-party integrations that we have, and making sure that the visibility and operations that we have go back up into there, and that all of the telemetry from all of that infrastructure feeds up into that threat intelligence. This is what healthy threat intelligence looks like. It's not simply getting a feed from somewhere. It's having that feed drive modern automation and orchestration. It's why we've created an entire industry around SOAR, security orchestration and automation tools, that companies are able to buy today, enterprises can implement today, to automate all of the disparate solutions that they have. What would be great is if all of this, if all the things that I talked about today, our workforce security, our cloud security, and our network security, the different threat intelligence components that we would need, what would be great is if all of that was available inside one unified architecture that allowed you to be able to drive portable controls across all three of those particular zero trust pillars, and to drive the automation and orchestration holistically, where it's not having to go up to a different tool, to go through human data analytics and to come back down. The technology today is advanced enough that we're able to do this. It's the reticence of us moving rapidly into that prevents us from actually driving faster and more effective security. And I think that that's one of the reasons why when I look at what the federal government is doing around zero trust, it's so compelling and it's so exciting. What they've done is they've decided that they no longer can rely on the older traditional architectures that they had. And they need to start taking advantage of the advancements that are here. For the last 3 years, I have sat at conferences and I have sat on executive CISO panels where I have heard CISOs from some of the largest organizations talk about orchestration and automation, about artificial intelligence and machine learning, and the need to have solutions that are able to drive it. What I'm here to tell you today is that these actually do exist today, and that they are being modernized across several of the different solutions that are out there. It's why you see so much rapid acquisition and integration coming across all the different suppliers that are out there. It's a very exciting time. Zero Trust actually has a place in our within our architecture today. It's something that we're actually able to implement much more effectively today. 10 years ago, we would have a very hard time talking about driving microsegmentation inside our data center. Today, you're able to look at emerging best-of-breed technology that drives that microsegmentation in the data center. It's not something that Check Point provides. It's something that I'm extremely excited about, though. There are suppliers that are out there that are doing it today all the way down to the memory and the application level, looking at the processes, and are able to drive zero trust all the way down to that level in the data center, which is an incredibly powerful thing for many organizations out there that need to have that type of isolation. That's the end of my presentation. Any questions from anyone? Otherwise, I know that we're at the end of the day. You guys have probably had a very long day, a very exciting day out there. Anything? All right. Great. Thank you very, very much, guys, for listening. Have a great rest of your day and a great time tomorrow.